So apparently it's not Matt Canada. It is not Mike Tomlin. It is not the coach's fault that the Pittsburgh Steelers are where they are and the struggles that they've had. Okay, now what? What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. Today, well, we're reacting to another step in the story of where are the Pittsburgh Steelers struggles coming from, and can they be fixed soon enough that this team is not wasted away? But frankly, this team might not be built to do much at all anytime soon. So, as everybody knows, Matt Canada has taken plenty of heat over the last 2 years, but more specifically over the last 4 weeks. Things have gotten pretty bad, and at this point, it's at a point where it's not even rocky anymore. The Pittsburgh Steelers fans, the media, the national media, everybody has made it known that Matt Canada is an issue, or that they believe Matt Canada is an issue. And the fan base as a whole, well, we've hit a point where everywhere I go, literally everywhere I go, I got a question from my fiance's student. She's a preschool teacher, and a 3-year-old said, well, he can't root for the Pittsburgh Steelers right now because Matt Canada stinks. That's what he said. Everybody wants Matt Canada gone. The fan base has screamed, hollered, shouted, brought signs to wrestling events, the whole nine. Matt Canada's got to go. Mike Tomlin has stood next to his coach time and time again, and now people have turned on Mike Tomlin and have said, well, maybe this is the end of Mike Tomlin. Maybe this feels like you can't come back from this. Maybe he's being too loyal to a guy who is going to bring him down with him. So then the players start talking. And while the players are also an issue in this whole thing, they've been pushed to the side as an excuse of, well, the coaching is so bad that you can't expect the players to be that good. And then Najee took the podium, or took the backdrop in the locker room, and unpromptly, he said all this.
Yeah, but the coach is only a coach. Man. Like, at the end of the day, we got to do what we have to do. And I mean, I see everybody talking about this coaching stuff about play calm, but bro, yeah, but I mean, look at bro. Yeah, but the coach is only a coach. Man. Like, at the end of the day, we got to do what we have to do. And I mean, I see everybody talking about this coaching stuff about play calm, but bro, like, do y'all know how football works? Coach is only a coach, but we got to execute the plays. Like, we're not trying to point the finger at all. This is not the time to do that either. It keeps me in a conversation we brought up, like, or not even a conversation brought up, but things that's just talked about so much. It's crazy. Like, we have to execute at the end of the day, no matter who's back there calling the plays. You know what I mean? Like, I honestly say that we're not doing that right now. Not coaches. It has nothing to do with coaches. It's just players. We have to play better. You know what I mean? We can't just keep looking at the coaches as an outlet, or whatever y'all putting out there as outlets. It's just stupid what y'all doing, really. You know what I mean? We can say what we want, but like I said, players play, coaches coach. You know what I mean? We can't just keep looking at pointing fingers. We got to point at ourselves. It's the man in the mirror, really. You know what I mean? This is the NFL. Everybody runs the same damn plays. You know what I mean? Everybody disguises it differently, but you know what I mean? It's just how we gonna play it. And we're not. Truthfully, I think that we're just not playing right with that edge right now. And that's what we need to do better.
Personally, I get it. You know, if you're bagging on somebody on my team, I'm going to go off too. I'm going to defend them. No hard feelings there. You know, I get that the player-media relationship is pretty tight. And if you're a guy who Googles the Pittsburgh Steelers on a daily basis, if you're a player who searches his name on social media, if you're one of those guys, and I'm not saying that Najee Harris is, but if you're one of those guys, you're going to have a much harder time in this league, and you're going to have a much bigger distaste for the people asking you questions, because everybody seems to associate Stephen A. Smith losing his mind and Noah Strackbine talking on Steelers to Go to a group of reporters asking questions in the locker room. And don't get me wrong, I believe that I'm in the mix of the people who have called out Matt Canada, and I'll acknowledge that and embrace that, and that's fine. But if you are aware of all these headlines, you're going to come back at it, and you're going to say things, and you're going to make your opinion known. And Najee Harris made his opinion known. It is not the coaching. It is not Matt Canada. It is the players. The players are the issue. They're playing soft. They are not executing. There are troubles here. Okay, so now what? Well, he's got a point. You look back at the film, and a couple of things have stood out. Kenny Pickett is terrible. We already acknowledged this. We don't know where to go from here or if he could get better, but for right now, Kenny Pickett is not a guy that most NFL teams would rely on as a starting quarterback if they redid the draft today. If you lined all 32 starting quarterbacks up and said, okay, NFL teams get to pick a new one every single time outside of the Pittsburgh Steelers just because they know who he is and they like him, it would be tough for him to go maybe in the top 30. Najee Harris has had a good time, but he's also struggled at times, and Jaylen Warren is hit or miss as well. The offensive line is terrible, and no matter how many times they try to fix it, they're terrible. Broderick Jones makes his appearance against the Houston Texans, and he's terrible. That's concerning for a 14th overall pick, but it's a guy that it was a draft class that you knew needed to develop. The problem is that the Pittsburgh Steelers have selected a bunch of guys recently who need to develop and frankly are just not developing. Darnell Washington has struggled mightily over the first 4 weeks of the season here in both blocking and route running, and that is a major concern. Connor Hayward didn't take the step forward that we hoped he did. George Pickens is 0-8 in contested catches. George Pickens is 0-8 in contested catches. That is very alarming. Calvin Austin is a home run hitter, but right now, not much else. And the defense, I mean, we've talked about the corners. We've talked about Demonte KZ and Keanu Neal and the lack of communication. We've talked about the awful run game. I mean, there are very few bright spots outside of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, and even both of them look terrible in week 4 against Houston and an awful offensive line. So maybe the Steelers don't have a roster that's built to win. Maybe it is the players. Maybe the players are the issue. The problem is that aren't the players a direct correlation of your coaching? Aren't the Houston Texans dealing with a ton of injuries and a ton of poor play? I mean, Kendrick Green was in Pittsburgh last season and couldn't get on the field one time. 2 years ago, he was their starting center, and he was atrocious. He didn't play that bad for the Houston Texans on Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers and a team that has a very good and stacked defensive line. We talked about how if there is one position group in the Pittsburgh Steelers that is deeper than any other, it is the defensive front. Well, Kendrick Green made that look like it was practice squad guys, and he could do whatever he wants. And in Pittsburgh, he couldn't even block practice squad guys. That's how bad he was. So where do you go from there? What's the excuse now? What's the reasoning now? Do you give up on everybody? Do you say, okay, well, all these first round picks aren't it. All these second round picks aren't it. All these offseason signings aren't it. All these veterans aren't it. We just have to start from scratch. The players are terrible. This is where we're at. Do you hope that the physicality and you just need everybody to spark up and maybe that's the answer is just like last season, you just need everybody to jump on a bandwagon and go 100% for the last 8 games and hope that you pull off a winning record and make it into the postseason, even though you can't do anything in the postseason if you're just barely squeaking in and your team's barely good enough to win games? Is that what you're hoping for? Is that where the Pittsburgh Steelers go from here? Or do you somewhere acknowledge that coaching is a direct correlation to play? That, yeah, there are only a handful of plays in the NFL and everybody runs the same plays, but the sequence of plays means a thing and where you call plays means a thing. I mean, Najee Harris refused to answer a question about the 4th and 1 call where they lined up in shotgun instead of handing him a ball in a game where he was clearly the best player on the field. So you ignore that question, but you blame the players. Everything goes hand in hand in the NFL, and I agree with that 100%. I don't think that it's all Matt Canada. I don't think that it's all Mike Tomlin. I don't think that it's all Terrell Austin. I don't think it's all Pat Myers. I don't think it's all anybody. I also don't think it's all the players. I don't think it's all Kenny Pickett. I don't think it's all the offensive line. I don't think it's all George Pickens or the wide receivers or the corners or whoever. I think it's a correlation of both. I think that it's a combination of You need new coaches because your coaches are stale and they're not getting anything done. And you need to stop relying on talent that, one, you need to develop with a coaching staff that isn't equipped to develop talent. And two, going out and getting guys that you just think are going to solve things. That's the thing. The Pittsburgh Steelers have been making this a patchwork job for years, and that patchwork job hasn't been working out. They've found holes every single time they try to patch things up in their roster, and it's just not working. And instead, they're drafting guys that they need to develop. And they're just in this constant cycle of, well, that guy's not ready yet, but this guy isn't good enough to play anymore. Well, we need somebody, but we don't have anybody in line to be that next person. Even the guys that are good enough to develop now, and Joey Porter Jr., they're not playing because for some reason they just don't want to. It's always both. And I get it. It is the players. The Steelers roster is not as good as it looks when it plays itself during training camp, and that's concerning. But you have a lot of young talent on this team, and nobody's developing it. You're just letting it waste away. And that right there, that's coaching.